Welcome to Hindsight, the podcast where I talk about games from my past. Today's episode is going to be a little bit on the shorter side. It's on a game I think few people are going to know of called N+. N+ is a Nintendo DS port of a Flash action platformer called N without the plus. The DS port is a definitive edition of sorts, featuring the levels from the Flash game as well as several additional levels, multiplayer, unlockable cosmetic skins, and more. Especially now in 2021 with Flash taken out back behind the barn for good, N+ is also a marginally more accessible version of the game, too. Although it was a Nintendo DS title, it was one of those that didn't make much use of the touchscreen, and I think that was okay. I picked the game up originally because I was familiar with the original Flash title. I spent many childhood hours on game sites such as Miniclip and Addicting Games playing these various titles. I fondly remember many of them: Motherlode, Stick RPG, Interactive Buddy, SAS Zombie Assault, Bloons, Hapland, Kitty Cannon, and yes, of course, N. With such an enormous library of Flash games out there back in the day, I don't really expect many to have caught this one over any of the other Flash platformers of the time. The reason N+ stands out for me is that it's so well designed. The gameplay is as smooth as any Meat Boy you could find on the market of the time, and I think it's really well held up over time against the more modern Hollow Knights, Celestes, and Oris of the gaming world. Of course, the lack of phenomenal storytelling sets this one far behind those three examples. Let's describe gameplay here. Given some of the other titles I just mentioned, you might have a pretty decent grasp of the style this game is going for. It's a fast-paced 2D platformer featuring many different types of obstacles that force you to anticipate specific timing, jump distances, mechanical tricks, and strategic planning. Your character, who I believe is rightly called N, is a tech ninja of sorts, running through secure facilities to do something. The story and characterization was all added entirely in the DS port, and kind of isn't important anyways, but I figured I'd mention the small bit since I remembered it. Each level takes place in a large rectangular room, each the same size as the last. Some of these chambers are close quarters with low ceilings to limit your ability to jump and dodge obstacles, while others are open and give you a lot of freedom for various obstacles such as lasers, robots, and missiles to come after you. The levels are grouped up in sets of 5, and you're given roughly 10 attempts to get through all 5, or you'll need to start over. N+ has, I want to say 50 of these sets, to my shattered memory. So 250 individual levels. Not bad for a Flash game port, huh? I almost want to call N a puzzle platformer due to the lock and key format of many levels, requiring you to activate a variety of switches and levers to open gates, and the big lock on each level which unlocks the exit. Many levels are based around the uniqueness of having to hit the exit switch, and can be exceptionally easy on the way to the switch, only to suddenly trap you as you try to make your way back to the door. There are also an abundance of one-way platforms in the game, which are used to limit your movement or give obstacles easier access to hitting you, often having lasers and missiles firing into the through side of these one-way platforms. Additionally, there are falling platforms similar to Mario's Womps. Now for controls. I think the control scheme is where this game shines. Back on the Flash version, the controls were limited to the arrow keys for movement and the spacebar for jump, though if you were like me, you probably played it one-handed, using the up arrow key to jump instead. The DS port added a pause button, but little else as far as I recall. The jumping gave a lot of control for you, being able to control the jump height, based on how long you press the button. The movement in the game was highly momentum-based, reminding me a little bit of Mirror's Edge, which I talked about in a previous episode of Hindsight. Running up a slope is slower than running down, Jumping off a slope launches you in a diagonal perpendicular to the slope rather than directly straight up. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but feels extremely nice once you do. You can abuse the momentum to launch yourself up vertical passageways with wall jumps, which you can use to gain so much speed that you splatter yourself against the ceiling with reverse fall damage. I mentioned obstacles a few times, so I suppose I'll dig into those a little bit. First, there are missiles. Missiles will guide themselves after your character to a fault, so usually the best option to deal with them is to get them to run into a nearby platform or another missile. Secondly, lasers. Probably not much explanation to do on these. They fire in a straight line as far as possible until they hit a wall or you. To my knowledge, there's no mirror blocks or anything to cause the lasers to change direction. Usually, there's just more lasers, if anything. Next, you have robot drones, and these come in two varieties, guided and unguided. Guided drones will fly in a straight line at you whenever you and the drone end up in the same row or column without any walls between you. This does not include one-way platforms to my knowledge. If they can see you, they're making a beeline straight for you. Unguided drones will faithfully follow the walls in a loop. Sometimes they'll circle singular blocks, other times they're distanced to make a cycle for you to fall into and follow around the loop. I always felt like the level design in this game was very unique and clever, making a large variety of difficult challenges that sometimes take immense skill and understanding of the game mechanics to conquer. The speeds you're able to get to while moving across the stages is very satisfying. It makes the game experience feel enticing, triggering a feeling of euphoria in me that I find in other fast-paced games like F-Zero and Kirby Air Ride. Only this one isn't a racing game. You might have noticed that I didn't have opening music for this episode, and that's because N+ really doesn't have anything in the way of music. Honestly, for me, that's not much of a problem, as this specific game is one that I would probably play while watching or listening to something else anyway. As tough as it can be, there's not really a whole lot going on that demands your auditory attention, beyond the occasional drone beeping and missile sound effect. I think the amount of sound of the game was about perfect. The low-key nature of the game, with just sound effects and some slight ambient music, was pretty much perfect to accommodate the shorter play sessions you might expect out of it. It's a perfect handheld game for taking during short downtimes, like waiting for an oil change or taking the bus. While I think there are certainly better games, especially in this genre, I think N+ is likely a highly overshadowed title, which is as good as many other platformers on the DS. It's definitely worth a try if this is your first time hearing about it. Well, I've about squeezed what I can out of this title. Look forward to the next episode featuring more kazoo and more games. Until then.